The jackhammer's roar drowns out her screams, but Sarah can see Karen's mouth moving, something about community property and emergency services. 3 police cars screech into the driveway. The demolition crew freezes. Sarah's heart pounds as she realizes her neighbor's 911 call just turned her dream renovation into a potential nightmare. But Karen has no idea what she's just unleashed or that Sarah's been recording everything. The morning sun cast long shadows across Sarah Chen's backyard as she stood at her kitchen window, coffee mug trembling slightly in her hands. Today was the day. After 3 months of planning, permits, and sleepless nights, the pool that had been her prison for 7 years was finally coming out. The kidney-shaped monstrosity dominated her modest quarter-acre lot like a concrete crater. Cracked tiles, a broken filtration system, and water that had turned an ominous shade of green despite her best efforts, it was a $40,000 headache she couldn't afford to maintain on a teacher's salary. Not after David left, taking half their savings and leaving her with the mortgage on the dream house that had become her nightmare. Sarah pulled her robe tighter and stepped onto the back patio. The demolition crew would arrive at 8 sharp, she'd been promised. By sunset, she'd have her yard back. Space for the vegetable garden she'd dreamed of, maybe a small deck where she could grade papers in peace. A fresh start. Excuse me. Excuse me. The shrill voice cut through the morning quiet like nails on a chalkboard. Sarah's stomach dropped. She didn't need to look over the 6-foot privacy fence to know who was approaching. Karen Westfield's voice was unmistakable, that particular pitch of indignation she'd perfected over her 15 years as the unofficial queen of Maple Grove subdivision. The fence gate rattled violently. Sarah. I know you're back there. We need to talk. Taking a deep breath, Sarah walked to the gate and opened it. Karen stood there in her pristine white jogging outfit, blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail despite the early hour. Her arms were crossed and her mouth was set in that thin line Sarah had learned to dread. Good morning, Karen. Don't you good morning me. Karen's blue eyes blazed. What is this nonsense about demolishing your pool? Janet Mueller saw the permits on the city website. You can't just destroy community assets. Sarah blinked. Community assets. It's my pool. On my property. That pool has been the centerpiece of our neighborhood for years. My children learned to swim in that pool. The Martinez kids, the Johnsons, half the street has used that pool. With permission, Sarah said carefully. When David and I invited people over for barbecues and pool parties. That doesn't make it community property. Karen's face flushed red. You're being selfish and spiteful just because David finally came to his senses and left you. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She gripped the gate frame to steady herself. What did you just say? Oh, don't act shocked. Everyone knows David was too good for you. A successful attorney tied down to a public school teacher who can't even keep her pool clean. Karen's voice dripped with venom. And now you're destroying property values out of spite. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She thought of the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, of the credit card bills David had racked up, of the affair she'd discovered through receipts for jewelry she'd never received. But she kept her voice level. Karen, the pool is being removed because I can't afford to maintain it. The renovation will actually improve my property value. I have every rights. Karen laughed harshly. What about our rights? What about our children's rights? That pool has been available to this community for 7 years. Available by invitation. Which stopped when I found out my husband was using it to entertain his secretary while I was at work. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then her eyes narrowed. That's not the point. You should have consulted the neighborhood association before making such a drastic decision. There is no neighborhood association, Karen. You made that up 2 years ago and appointed yourself president. The homeowners have a voice. You can't just unilaterally decide to remove a community resource. Sarah felt her patience evaporating like water from the very pool they were arguing about. Karen, I'm done with this conversation. The demolition crew will be here soon and I have work to do. She started to close the gate, but Karen grabbed it. You can't do this. I won't let you. Let me. Sarah's voice rose despite her best efforts. Let me. Karen, unless you want to buy my house and take over the mortgage payments, you have absolutely no say in what I do with my property. A rumble of engines announced the arrival of the demolition crew. 2 trucks pulled into Sarah's driveway, one carrying a small excavator, the other loaded with jackhammers and debris containers. The crew chief, a weathered man in his 50s named Rodriguez, had assured her they could have the pool demolished and filled in a single day. Karen's eyes went wild. This is happening too fast. You need community input. Environmental impact studies. What about the water table? I have all the permits, Karen. It's legal, it's safe, and it's happening. Rodriguez approached the gate, clipboard in hand. Miss Chen. We are ready to begin. Where would you like us to start? The deep end, Sarah said, not taking her eyes off Karen. Let's get this over with. Karen's face went purple. You're making a huge mistake. The entire neighborhood will hear about this. She stormed off, her white sneakers slapping against the pavement with military precision. Sarah watched her go, then turned to Rodriguez. Sorry about that. Neighbor troubles. He nodded knowingly. We get it all the time. Don't worry, we'll have this done before she can cause any real problems. If only he knew Karen like Sarah did. The morning progressed smoothly. The crew worked with professional efficiency, draining the remaining stagnant water and beginning the careful process of breaking up the concrete. The sound of jackhammers filled the air, rhythmic and purposeful. For the first time in months, Sarah felt something like hope. She was inside making lunch for the crew when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Karen again, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Janet Mueller from 3 houses down, Bob Peterson from across the street, and Maria Santos from the corner house. Sarah opened the door. Karen, I thought we settled this. We are here as concerned neighbors, Karen announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. We've discussed the situation, and we all agree this demolition needs to stop until we can have a proper neighborhood meeting. Sarah looked past Karen to the others. Janet wouldn't meet her eyes. Bob shifted uncomfortably. Only Maria looked genuinely apologetic. Is that what you all think? Sarah asked. Janet finally spoke up. Well, it does seem sudden. Maybe if we talked about it. Janet, how many times have you been in my backyard in the past 3 years? Oh well. Never, Sarah answered. None of you have. Because none of you were invited. Because my marriage was falling apart and I didn't feel like hosting pool parties where everyone could watch my husband flirt with other women. Bob cleared his throat. Sarah, we are not trying to interfere, then don't. Sarah's voice was firm. This is my property, my decision, and my money. If any of you want to contribute to pool maintenance and repairs, I'll gladly keep it. Otherwise, stay out of my business. Karen stepped forward. You're not thinking clearly. Grief can cloud judgment. Maybe you should wait, grief. Sarah's voice rose. I'm not grieving, Karen. I'm moving on. Something you apparently can't understand. The jackhammer noise stopped. Abruptly. In the sudden quiet, Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Then Rodriguez's voice carried from the backyard, Miss Chen. We might have a problem back here. Sarah pushed past the group on her porch and hurried to the backyard. The crew was clustered around the shallow end of the pool, staring down at something in the broken concrete. What is it? Sarah asked. Rodriguez looked up, his face grim. You're going to want to see this. We found something that wasn't in the original construction plans. Sarah approached the edge of the pool. There, revealed by the broken concrete, was a metal access panel she'd never seen before. It was partially corroded, but she could make out what looked like electrical connections and some kind of monitoring equipment. What the hell is that? Looks like surveillance equipment, Rodriguez said quietly. Professional grade. Been here a while. Sarah's blood ran cold. She thought about all the pool parties, all the neighborhood gatherings, all the times she'd thought she was safe in her own backyard. Someone had been watching. Recording. Behind her, she heard Karen's sharp intake of breath. "Oh my God, Karen!" whispered. Sarah turned around slowly. Karen's face had gone white, and for the first time since Sarah had known her, the woman looked genuinely afraid. "Karen," Sarah said softly, "do you know anything about this?" The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Karen's face had drained of all color, her usual commanding presence crumbling as she stared at the exposed surveillance equipment. Janet, Bob, and Maria crowded behind her, craning their necks to see what had caused such a dramatic shift in the morning's dynamics. "I don't," Karen stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Rodriguez climbed out of the pool, brushing concrete dust from his gloves. "Miss Chen, we need to stop work until this gets sorted out. This equipment looks federal grade, the kind of stuff that requires warrants and official authorization." Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. "Federal? What are you talking about?" I did 3 tours in Afghanistan. I know military surveillance tech when I see it." He pointed at the partially exposed panel. "That's not some DIY security camera. That's professional-grade monitoring equipment, probably worth more than your house." Bob Peterson pushed forward. His face flushed with indignation. "Are you saying someone's been spying on us? On the whole neighborhood?" "Not someone," Sarah said slowly, her eyes never leaving Karen's face. "Someone with access to my backyard. Someone who knew the pools. Construction well enough to hide equipment during installation." She took a step closer to Karen. "Someone who's been encouraging neighborhood pool parties for 7 years." Karen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Maria Santos gasped. "Dios mío," Maria whispered. "All those birthday parties. All those barbecues. The kids." "Karen," Janet's voice was sharp with growing panic. "Karen, what is this?" But Karen was backing away, her hands trembling. "I need to go. I need to I have to make some calls." "Oh no," Sarah said firmly, moving to block her path. "You're not going anywhere until you explain what the hell is in my pool." "Sarah, I can't. You don't understand the complexity of, try me." Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Ladies, I hate to interrupt, but we are legally required to report this. I'm calling the police." "No." Karen's voice cracked like a whip. "You can't. Not yet. There are protocols, procedures, protocols." Sarah's voice rose to a near shout. "What protocols, Karen? For spying on your neighbors? For violating our privacy? For recording our children swimming?" The weight of Sarah's words hit the assembled neighbors like a physical blow. Janet staggered backward, her hand pressed to her mouth. Bob's face turned purple with rage. "You recorded our kids?" Bob's voice was dangerously low. "My daughter's birthday party last summer. When she had all her friends over." Karen looked trapped, cornered, her usual imperious confidence shattered. "It's not what you think. It was never about the children. It was about what?" Sarah demanded. Karen's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and whatever she saw there made her face go even wider. Her hands started shaking so violently she nearly dropped the device. "I have to go," she said again, but this time her voice held pure terror. "You don't understand what you've stumbled into. Some things are bigger than neighborhood disputes." She turned and ran. Actually ran, her perfect ponytail bouncing as she sprinted across Sarah's lawn with surprising speed for someone in her 50s. The remaining neighbors stared after her in stunned silence. "Should we go after her?" Janet asked weakly. "Let her go," Rodriguez said grimly. "But I'm still calling this in. Miss Chen, you might want to contact a lawyer." Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost declined the call, but something made her answer. "Miss Chen." The voice was crisp, professional, with a slight accent. She couldn't place. My name is Agent Martinez with the FBI. We need to talk. Sarah's legs nearly gave out. FBI. We've been monitoring some unusual activity in your neighborhood. The equipment your demolition crew found, we've been looking for it for 18 months. Looking for it? You mean you didn't put it there? Miss Chen, is Karen Westfield still in your vicinity? Sarah looked around frantically. Karen was nowhere to be seen. She just ran off. Why? What's going on? We need you to keep your neighbors together and stay exactly where you are. Do not let anyone leave the property. We have units en route. Units? Sarah's voice pitched higher. What kind of units? Federal agents, local police, and a bomb squad. The phone slipped from Sarah's suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering on the concrete. Rodriguez caught it before it could hit the ground. Hello. This is Rodriguez, the demolition foreman. Did you say bomb squad? The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. The surveillance equipment appears to be connected to something else. Something that shouldn't be there. We need everyone to evacuate the immediate area around the pool until we can assess the situation. Maria Santos had been quietly backing toward the gate during the phone conversation. Now she broke into a run, heading for her house. Janet and Bob looked at each other, panic evident in their eyes. Nobody moves. Rodriguez shouted with military authority. FBI says stay put. But my kids are at home. Maria cried. My babies. Sarah's mind reeled. 18 months. The FBI had been looking for surveillance equipment hidden in her pool for 18 months. Karen's terrified reaction. The professional-grade equipment. The phone call that had sent Karen running. Rodriguez, Sarah said slowly, when did you say this equipment looked like it was installed? Hard to say exactly, but based on the corrosion and the way the concrete settled around it, I'd guess during original construction. Maybe 7, 8 years ago. 8 years ago. When she and David had first moved in. When they'd hired the pool company that Karen had recommended. The pool company owned by Karen's brother-in-law. Oh God, Sarah whispered. The sound of sirens filled the air, multiple sirens, growing louder by the second. Through her back gate, Sarah could see black SUVs pulling into her driveway alongside the police cars. Men and women in tactical gear were pouring out, moving with practiced efficiency. Agent Martinez appeared at the gate, a compact woman in her 40s with steel grey eyes and an earpiece. She flashed her badge. Miss Chen. I'm Agent Martinez. We spoke on the phone. What is happening to my life? Sarah asked desperately. Your neighbor Karen Westfield is not who she claims to be. Neither is her husband, Mike. They've been running a sophisticated intelligence operation from your neighborhood for the past 8 years. Janet Mueller made a sound like a wounded animal. Intelligence operation. Foreign intelligence, Agent Martinez clarified. They've been monitoring defense contractors, government employees, and tech executives who live in this area. The pool was the perfect cover: neighborhood gatherings, children's parties, adults relaxing with their guards down. Bob Peterson sank onto Sarah's patio chair, his face gray. My company has defense contracts. I've brought my laptop to pool parties, taken calls. We know, Martinez said grimly. That's why we need to debrief all of you extensively. Sarah felt like she was drowning in information. But Karen called 911 this morning. She tried to stop the demolition. If she was hiding this equipment, why would she? Martinez's radio crackled. A voice reported, Agent Martinez, we have a problem. The Westfield house is empty. Looks like they cleared out in a hurry. Recent, maybe within the last hour. Martinez cursed under her breath. They knew, she said to Sarah. Someone tipped them off that you were demolishing today. Tipped them off. But the permits have been public for weeks, Sarah stopped mid-sentence. Unless what, Ms. Chen? Sarah's blood turned to ice. Unless someone wanted me to find this equipment. Unless someone wanted Karen to be exposed. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found it, the number for David's new apartment. The apartment he'd moved into right after their divorce was finalized. The apartment that happened to be in the same complex where Agent Martinez said other foreign operatives had been identified. The apartment David had insisted she put him in touch with Karen about, claiming he needed a good real estate recommendation. David, who had encouraged her to get the pool installed in the first place. David, who had left her but made sure she kept the house with the pool. David, who had texted her just yesterday, "Hope the demolition goes smoothly tomorrow. You deserve a fresh start." Sarah looked up at Agent Martinez, her voice barely a whisper. "I think my ex-husband just destroyed an 8-year intelligence operation to get revenge on me for filing for divorce." Agent Martinez's expression shifted from professional concern to sharp focus. "Miss Chen, I need you to explain that statement immediately." Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled up David's contact information. "My ex-husband, David Chen, well, David Morrison now, he changed his name back after the divorce. He's the one who convinced me to install this pool. He recommended the contractor, Karen's brother-in-law. He insisted we get the premium package with all the extra features." The agent was already speaking into her radio. "I need a full workup on David Morrison, formerly David Chen. Last known address." She looked at Sarah expectantly. "Ocean View Apartments, Building C, Unit 47, Sarah recited numbly. "He moved there 2 months ago." "Building C." Agent Martinez's face went grim. "That's the same building where we've been monitoring suspected Russian assets." Rodriguez, who had been quietly listening while his crew secured the area, stepped forward. "There's something else. When we started breaking up the concrete around that equipment, we found conduit lines running under the pool deck. They don't go to any normal pool systems." "Where do they go?" Martinez asked. "Toward the house next door. The Westfield's house." Janet Mueller had been hyperventilating quietly on Sarah's patio furniture. Now she stood up abruptly. "Wait. Wait just a damn minute." Her voice shook with fury. "Are you telling us that Sarah's pool has been some kind of spy headquarters? For 8 years. And we've all been bringing our families here. We understand this is shocking, shocking." Bob Peterson exploded. "My kids played Marco Polo in a goddamn intelligence gathering operation. My wife sunbathed 20 feet from Russian surveillance equipment." Sarah felt like she was watching the conversation from outside her body. 8 years. Every barbecue, every birthday party, every summer evening when neighbors had gathered around her pool with their guard down. Every conversation about work, family troubles, financial problems. All of it recorded. All of it potentially transmitted to foreign operatives. And David had orchestrated it all. Her phone buzzed. Text message from David: "How's the demolition going? Hope you're not having any unexpected surprises." Smiling face, Sarah showed the message to Agent Martinez, who immediately called for a tech specialist. "When did he send this?" Martinez demanded. Sarah checked the timestamp. 37 minutes ago. Right around the time we found the equipment. He's been monitoring the situation somehow. Martinez spoke into a radio again. "I need surveillance on David Morrison immediately. Consider him a flight risk and potentially armed." "Armed?" Sarah's voice cracked. "David's never owned a gun in his life. He's afraid of spiders. People change when they are involved in espionage. Especially when operations go sideways." Another agent approached Martinez, a tall man in a dark suit who looked like he'd stepped out of a government recruitment poster. He whispered something in her ear, and her face darkened. "Miss Chen, we need to discuss your marriage. Specifically, the timeline of when problems began between you and David." Sarah's mind raced backward. "About 2 years ago. Maybe a little more. He started working late, traveling more. He said his law firm was expanding into international contracts." "What kind of international contracts?" "Oh. I don't know. He was always vague about it. Said it was confidential client work. Sarah paused, pieces clicking into place. He started getting angry when I talked about replacing the pool. Said it was a valuable neighborhood asset, that it brought people together. Agent Martinez exchanged glances with her colleague. Miss Chen, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. In the past 2 years, did David ever encourage you to invite specific people to pool parties? Did he ever seem particularly interested in certain neighbors or their work? The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She sank into one of her patio chairs, memories flooding back. Oh my God, she whispered. Bob's company. David kept asking me to invite Bob and his family over. Said we should be friendlier with the neighbors. And the Johnsons, Jim Johnson works for that tech company that does government contracts. David always made sure to talk to him at parties. What did they talk about? Work stuff. Projects, deadlines, security protocols. I thought David was just being social, networking. Sarah's voice rose to near hysteria. He was pumping them for information. Right in my backyard. Maria Santos had been quietly crying throughout the conversation. Now she looked up with red-rimmed eyes. What about my family? My husband works construction on the military base. We talked about his projects, the security changes they were making. Agent Martinez nodded grimly. We'll need detailed statements from all of you about what information might have been compromised. Sarah's phone rang. David again. This time she answered, putting it on speaker at Martinez's gesture. Sarah. David's voice was artificially cheerful. How's my favorite ex-wife? Where are you, David? Sarah tried to keep her voice steady. Just running some errands. I heard there was quite a commotion at the old house. FBI agents, bomb squads, you always did know how to make a scene. Agent Martinez leaned toward the phone. Mr. Morrison. This is Agent Martinez with the FBI. We'd like to speak with you. The line went quiet for several long seconds. When David spoke again, his voice had completely changed, colder, more calculating. Agent Martinez. I wondered when you'd figure it out. Mr. Morrison, we need you to come in for questioning. David laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. I don't think so. You see, I've been very careful. Everything I did was perfectly legal. I married Sarah, I suggested she get a pool, I socialized with the neighbors. Being a friendly husband isn't a crime. Conspiracy to commit espionage is, Martinez said flatly. Prove it. Prove I knew what Karen and Mike were really doing. Prove I knew about the surveillance equipment. Prove I intended for Sarah to find it today. His voice turned mocking. Good luck with that. Sarah found her voice. You bastard. You used me. You used our marriage, our home, our friends. I gave you a beautiful life for 7 years, Sarah. A house you never could have afforded, parties with interesting people, a pool that made you the envy of the neighborhood. You should be thanking me. Thanking you. You turned me into an unwitting accomplice to treason. Treason. David's laugh was sharp. That's such a dramatic word. I prefer international consulting. Agent Martinez cut in. Mr. Morrison, the game is over. Karen and Mike Westfield are in custody. Actually, they are not. David's voice was smug. They are currently somewhere over the Atlantic, heading for a country with very relaxed extradition policies. Turns out their handler gave them a heads up about your little demolition project. Sarah's blood ran cold. Their handler? Oh, Sarah. Sweet, naive Sarah. Did you really think a small-time attorney like me could orchestrate something this sophisticated? I was just the recruiter. The guy who identified targets, facilitated meetings, provided the venue. Who were you working for? Martinez demanded. Does it matter? The operation is blown, the principals are gone, and you have exactly zero evidence that I did anything more than be a sociable neighbor. I was very, very careful about that. Sarah stared at the phone in horror. The divorce. You didn't fight. The divorce because you knew this day would come. You knew I'd eventually tear down the pool, and when you did, the operation would be exposed, but I'd be safely divorced from you and living under a different name. Clean break, new identity, minimal exposure. His voice turned cruel. You always were predictable, Sarah. I knew exactly how you'd react to financial pressure. Knew you'd want to erase every trace of our marriage, including the pool. The neighbors were staring at Sarah with a mixture of pity and horror. She realized that in their eyes, she wasn't just a victim, she was also the woman whose backyard had been used to spy on them for nearly a decade. Agent Martinez spoke into a radio. All units, David Morrison is likely attempting to flee. Consider him armed and dangerous. Oh, Agent Martinez, David's voice drifted from the phone speaker, you might want to check on the rest of your surveillance sites. I may have left you a few more surprises. The line went dead. Sarah looked around at her neighbors, Janet's accusatory stare, Bob's barely controlled rage, Maria's tears, and realized that even though she'd been as much a victim as any of them, she would forever be the woman who'd brought espionage to Maple Grove subdivision. Agent Martinez's radio crackled urgently, we have a problem. Morrison's apartment is empty, but we found plans. Detailed architectural drawings of 12 other houses in the area. All with pools installed by the same contractor in the last 8 years. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. 12 other houses. Sarah watched the color drain from her neighbors' faces as the full scope of David's operation became clear. 12 houses, Janet whispered. Oh God, the Hendersons just installed a pool last spring. The Patels got one 2 summers ago. Agent Martinez was already coordinating with her team. I need tactical units at the following addresses immediately. She began rattling off street numbers that Sarah recognized, friends, acquaintances, the fabric of her entire neighborhood. Bob Peterson stood up abruptly, his face purple with rage. I'm getting my family and we're leaving. Right now. Mr. Peterson, I need you to stay. Bob's voice cracked with fury. My wife is home making lunch while Russian spies could be listening to every word through our pool house speakers. My daughter could be swimming in a goddamn intelligence gathering operation right now. He stormed toward the gate, but 2 FBI agents blocked his path. Sir, this is an active investigation. No one leaves until we've secured all potential surveillance sites. You can't hold us here. Janet shrieked. We have rights. We are the victims. Sarah felt the weight of dozens of accusing stares. Even though she had known, even though she'd been manipulated just as much as anyone else, she was the common thread. Her house. Her pool. Her husband. Her marriage that had been a lie from the very beginning. Agent Martinez approached her, lowering her voice. Ms. Chen, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Looking back on your relationship with David, were there any signs that his interest in you might have been manufactured? The question was like a knife to the chest. Sarah thought back to their first meeting at a coffee shop near the university, where she taught. He'd been charming, attentive, seemingly fascinated by her work with children. He'd claimed to be a newly minted lawyer looking for community connections. We met at a teacher recruitment event, Sarah said slowly. He said he was there because he was interested in education policy. He asked me out that same day. How did he seem to know so much about your life so quickly? Sarah's stomach churned. He said he'd looked me up online, that he was impressed by my dedication to public education. I thought it was sweet that he'd done his research. She paused, realization dawning. But he knew things that weren't online. Personal things about my family, my financial situation, my dreams of owning a home with a big backyard. Ms. Chen, did David ever ask you about specific students' families? Particularly those whose parents worked in defense or technology? The blood drained from Sarah's face. Oh my God. The Anderson's son, Tommy, his father works for Lockheed Martin. David always asked about Tommy, wanted to know if his parents were involved in school events. And Lisa Nguyen, her mother works for some cybersecurity company. David suggested I invite them to teacher appreciation dinners at our house. Agent Martinez nodded grimly. He was using you to identify and recruit targets before they even moved to the neighborhood. Rodriguez approached them, his face grave. Agent Martinez, my crew finished checking the pool structure. There are communication cables running to 11 different houses. Fiber optic lines, professionally installed, completely hidden in the neighborhood's landscaping. 11 houses. The 12th property, the Morrison apartment building, that appears to be the central hub where all the data was collected and transmitted. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another text from David, turn on the news, Sarah. Channel 7. You might find it interesting. Agent Martinez grabbed the phone and immediately called her tech team to trace the signal, but Sarah was already reaching for the remote control on her patio table. The small outdoor TV flickered to life. Breaking news this afternoon as FBI agents conduct raids across the Maple Grove subdivision in what sources describe as one of the largest domestic espionage operations discovered in the past decade. Sarah's face filled the screen, a photo from her school district's website. The banner read, Local Teacher's Property Renovation Uncovers Massive Spy Ring. The operation appears to have been centered around the home of Sarah Chen, a 4th grade teacher at Oakwood Elementary, whose backyard pool served as a hub for surveillance equipment. Turn it off, Agent Martinez ordered, but the damage was done. Maria Santos was staring at the screen in horror. They are making it sound like Sarah was in on it. I wasn't. Sarah's voice cracked. I had no idea. But even as she protested, she could see doubt in her neighbor's eyes. How could she have lived with David for 7 years and not suspected anything? How could she have hosted dozens of gatherings without noticing the surveillance equipment? The news report continued. In the background, neighbors described Chen as a private individual who rarely socialized outside of pool parties at her home. Sources suggest the operation may have compromised classified information from defense contractors and government employees throughout the area. Sarah's phone rang again. This time it was a number she recognized, Oakwood Elementary. Sarah. It was Principal Williams, her voice tight with stress. I need you to come in immediately. The school board has called an emergency meeting. Mrs. Williams, I can't leave right now. The FBI, Sarah, parents are already calling. They want to know if their children's information was compromised. If their families were targeted because of school events at your house. Williams paused. I'm sorry, but you're being placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The phone slipped from Sarah's numb fingers. Administrative leave. 8 years of teaching, building relationships with students and families, earning the trust of her community, all of it potentially destroyed because her husband had been a spy. Agent Martinez caught her arm as she swayed. Miss Chen, we're going to need you to come with us for debriefing. This could take several days. Several days? You were married to the primary operative for 7 years. You hosted dozens of intelligence gathering events. Even though you were an unwitting participant, you're our best source of information about how the operation worked. Janet Mueller stepped forward, her voice cold. What about our families? What about our safety? If these people were willing to run a spy ring for 8 years, what else might they have planned? Before Agent Martinez could answer, Rodriguez's radio crackled, emergency at the Henderson property. The pool house just exploded. The sound of sirens filled the air again, but this time they were racing away from Sarah's house toward another part of the subdivision. Black smoke was visible rising above the tree line 3 blocks away. Agent Martinez spoke urgently into her radio, all units, we may have booby traps at the other surveillance sites. Evacuate all civilians immediately. Sarah's phone buzzed one final time. A long text message from David, Sarah, by now you understand the scope of what you've uncovered. The Henderson explosion was just the beginning, insurance, you might call it. Each of the 12 sites has similar failsafes, set to activate if the equipment is discovered. You have approximately 6 hours before they all detonate. The only way to disarm them is with codes that I possess. I'm sure Agent Martinez can explain the leverage that gives me. Oh, and Sarah. You might want to check your basement. That foundation crack you've been worried about. It's not from settling. Tell the FBI I'll be in touch with my terms. Love always, your devoted husband. P.S. You never were very good at reading people. Agent Martinez grabbed the phone, her face pale as she read the message aloud to her team. He's turned the entire neighborhood into a hostage situation, she said grimly. And is using Sarah's house as ground zero. As if on cue, Sarah heard a faint beeping sound coming from inside her house. A sound she'd never noticed before, rhythmic and electronic. Coming from the basement. The basement where David had insisted they install a wine cellar that she'd never bothered to use. The basement where he'd spent countless evenings organizing paperwork during the last 2 years of their marriage. Sarah looked at Agent Martinez, her voice barely audible. I think we need to go downstairs. Right now. The beeping grew louder as they descended into Sarah's basement, accompanied by the heavy footsteps of FBI agents and the mechanical whir of bomb detection equipment. Sarah's hands shook as she flicked on the lights, illuminating the finished basement that David had insisted on renovating 3 years ago. There, Agent Martinez pointed to the wine cellar in the far corner. The sound is coming from there. The wine cellar that Sarah had never used because she didn't drink wine. The wine cellar that David had insisted they needed for entertaining clients. The wine cellar with the electronic lock that he'd claimed was to protect their investment. Rodriguez had followed them down with his demolition equipment. Miss Chen, what's the access code for that door? Oh. I don't know. David always opened it. He said it was our anniversary date, but I never actually saw him enter it. Agent Martinez's bomb tech, a thin woman named Agent Parker, was running sensors along the wine cellar walls. I'm reading significant electronic activity behind this door. Multiple devices, possibly connected to a central timer. Can you disarm it? Not without knowing the system. If it's booby-trapped and we try to force entry. Parker's voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Sarah's phone rang. David again. Answer it, Martinez instructed. Keep him talking. Sarah's voice cracked as she answered. David, please. Whatever you're planning, there are innocent people here. Children. Oh, Sarah. His voice was almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. Always thinking about the children. That's what made you such a perfect cover. Who suspects a devoted elementary school teacher of harboring foreign agents? I never harbored anyone. I was your victim. Victim. David laughed coldly. Sarah, you were the perfect accomplice. Every time you invited neighbors over, every time you encouraged their children to play in our pool, every time you organized those delightful barbecues where people felt comfortable sharing details about their work, you were helping me build intelligence profiles. Agent Martinez held up a hand, signaling for Sarah to keep him talking while her team worked. David, how do we open the wine cellar? What's the code? The code is irrelevant now. You see, I've already triggered the countdown. 6 hours, remember. But here's the interesting part, the basement device isn't just a bomb. It's the central control for the entire neighborhood network. Sarah's blood ran cold. What does that mean? It means that if anyone tries to tamper with the devices in the other houses, or if the timer reaches 0, all 12 locations detonate simultaneously. But if you're very, very good, and if Agent Martinez follows my instructions exactly, I might be persuaded to provide the disarm codes. Agent Martinez leaned toward the phone. What are your terms, Morrison? First, all federal agents withdraw from the neighborhood immediately. Second, you provide me with safe passage to a country of my choosing. Third, you transfer $5 million to an account I'll specify. And fourth, his voice turned vicious. Sarah publicly confesses on live television that she knowingly participated in espionage activities. That's not happening, Sarah said immediately. Then 12 families die, including yours, Sarah. Because yes, dear wife, you're staying in that basement until this is resolved. Think of it as your final contribution to the operation. Agent Parker suddenly looked up from her equipment, her face pale. Agent Martinez, I'm reading a proximity sensor on the basement device. If anyone tries to leave the basement, it triggers immediately. Sarah felt the walls closing in. David, you're insane. I never did anything wrong. Oh, but you did, Sarah. You suspected, didn't you? Deep down, you knew something wasn't right. The late-night phone calls, the mysterious income that let us afford this house, the way I always steered conversations toward certain topics at our parties. You chose to ignore the signs because you liked the lifestyle. That's not true. Isn't it? Remember when you found that encrypted USB drive in my office? You asked me about it once, then never brought it up again. Remember when you noticed that our neighbors always seemed to leave our parties looking troubled? You chose willful ignorance, Sarah. That makes you complicit. Sarah's mind reeled. She did remember the USB drive. She'd found it in David's desk drawer and asked him about it. He'd said it was client files, attorney-client privilege, and she'd dropped the subject. She had noticed that their guests sometimes seemed uncomfortable after talking to David, but she'd assumed it was because he was probing about their work lives out of professional curiosity. Had she been willfully blind? Had some part of her known? Agent Martinez's radio crackled. We've evacuated all civilians from the potential blast radius, but we are getting reports of panic throughout the subdivision. People are trying to leave their homes and we are having to physically restrain them for their own safety. How many people are in the evacuation zone? Sarah asked weakly. Approximately 340 residents, including 87 children. Sarah sank onto her basement couch. 340 people whose lives hung in the balance because of choices made in her basement, in her backyard, in her marriage. David's voice continued from the phone. You have 5 hours and 37 minutes to decide, Sarah. Your public confession, or the blood of your entire neighborhood on your hands. Choose wisely. The line went dead. Agent Martinez immediately began coordinating with her team. I need the best bomb techs from Quantico here in 4 hours. I need satellite surveillance on all possible escape routes from the city. And I need a psychological profile team to analyze Morrison's demands. Agent Martinez, Sarah said quietly, what if I do it? What if I confess on television? Miss Chen, even if you did, there's no guarantee he'd provide the codes. He could let you humiliate yourself and then detonate anyway. Sarah stood up and walked to the wine cellar door. She pressed her ear against it and could hear the beeping more clearly now, steady, rhythmic, counting down to catastrophe. There's something else, she said slowly. David said he triggered the countdown when we found the pool equipment. But that was over an hour ago. If we really have 6 hours total, that means... Agent Parker checked her tablet. 4 hours and 53 minutes remaining. Sarah closed her eyes and made a decision that surprised even her. Agent Martinez. I need you to get me a television crew. I'm going to confess. Miss Chen, we can't advise, you're not advising. I'm deciding. Sarah's voice was stronger now, filled with a determination she hadn't felt since the day she'd filed for divorce. But I'm not confessing to espionage. I'm confessing to something else entirely. She looked directly into Agent Martinez's eyes. I'm confessing to being the woman who recorded every single conversation David had with our neighbors for the past 2 years. The woman who's been building her own evidence file because she suspected her husband was having affairs. The woman who has hours of audio recordings of David pumping defense contractors for classified information. Agent Martinez's eyes widened. You recorded him. Hidden voice recorder in the pool house. I thought I was gathering evidence of infidelity for the divorce. Sarah smiled grimly. Turns out I was gathering evidence of treason. And David has no idea those recordings exist. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a cloud storage app. 47 hours of audio files. David coaching Karen on what questions to ask guests. David instructing Mike Westfield on how to access the surveillance equipment. David explaining exactly how the neighborhood intelligence network operated. Sarah looked around the basement at the wine cellar that had been turned into a bomb. At the FBI agents who were trying to save her neighbors, at the home that had been turned into a weapon against innocent people. Get me that television crew, Agent Martinez. It's time for the real truth to come out. And David. He's about to learn that he's not the only one who's been playing a long game. Agent Martinez was already on her radio. I need a media relations team here immediately. And get me a direct line to the Attorney General. We are about to flip this entire operation. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from David. Tick-tock, Sarah. 4 hours and 47 minutes. She typed back, see you soon, husband. I have something to show you. For the first time in 8 years, Sarah Chen was no longer afraid of David Morrison. She was angry. And she was done being anyone's victim.